Hello, my name is Joshua Fernando, and I am going to be presenting on the impact of climate change caused drought on the Navajo people's lifestyle in agriculture and cattle. For my abstract, I studied, my study examined the socioeconomic and agricultural impacts of climate change-induced drought on the Navajo people, with a particular focus on their agriculture and cattle. The Navajo Nation Reserve, spanning Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, is highly vulnerable to drought. The objective of this research is to investigate the cultural and economic effects of drought driven by climate change on the Navajo people, and to assess the potential severity of future droughts. Limited research exists on the complex relationship between climate change, drought, and the Navajo way of life, making the assessment challenging. By analyzing various data sources and models, including climate data, the IPCC Interactive Atlas, remote sensing technology, the Standardized Precipitation Evapotranspiration Index, and cattle and agricultural data, this study will aim and establish a connection between climate change-induced drought and the deterioration of living conditions for the Navajo people. The expected results suggest that droughts resulting from climate change will have a negative impact on Navajo agriculture and cattle, which will lead to overall poorer living conditions, as this is a large part of their economic sector. The research findings are crucial for developing mitigation strategies addressing the long-standing mistreatment and inequality faced by the Navajo community. However, limitations such as data availability and statistical analysis may require assistance during the study, which required assistance during the study. So for my introduction, I examined the Navajo Native American people. To the Navajo, agriculture and cattle are a large part of their society, and droughts are endangering their way of life in that way. According to the May 31, 2022 U.S. Drought Monitor, more than half Pacific Northwest is experiencing drought, and it has been doing so since in 2013. This has caused major impacts on the vegetation available for pastures and cattle. Climate change is causing more extreme weather patterns, which are impacting vegetation and agriculture. Three objectives of my study are to investigate the effects of climate change-induced drought on Navajo people's livelihood, to connect the increased occurrence of drought to climate change, and to begin to develop mitigation strategies in support for this historically mistreated nation. So for my study area, like I mentioned, is the Navajo Nation, which is located in 3 different states: Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. The majority of the Navajo Nation exists in Arizona and New Mexico. As you can see, this is a blown up picture of the one previously. It does not go into Colorado. As you can see, there is a large gap kind of in the middle area of the reserve. This is a different Native American reserve called the Hopi Reserve. As you can see, it stretches quite large the distance, as this is one of the largest Native American reserves in America. This reserve has various geographic features, including deserts, grasslands, forests, mountains, plateaus, and canyons, as well as mountains of various elevations. So for my methods and materials, I analyzed various sources of data and data analysis tools, including the IPCC Interactive Atlas, various peer-reviewed articles, and other accredited institutions, such as Arizona University and Purdue University. Through these resources, I hoped to be able to examine the relationship that exists between climate change, drought, and Navajo livelihood, which I broke down into these three categories: climate, drought, and livelihood, and uses various sources to study the data to connect each of these 3 points. So I would like to focus on the projectional analysis of conditions of Navajo Preserve, but also as well as the current conditions. I employed remote sensing technology such as satellite data, which enabled a geographic perspective of drought. But then I also used the SPEI, which stands for the Standardized Precipitation Evapotranspiration Index, which is a summative variable that studies drought. I also used various maps and figures to understand the impact climate change has, specifically drying and the increased heat. I used the IPCC Interactive Atlas, NASA, the USDA, and other peer-reviewed articles to do so. Through these sources, I was able to connect and observe the relationship between drought-induced climate change and the success of farming and cattle. So, as I used the IPCC Interactive Atlas, I focused on temperature and precipitation, specifically the max, the minimum, and the mean temperature, as well as monthly precipitation. In the Navajo Nation and Reserve, the growing season is usually somewhere between June and August, and the collection period is around September, or the harvesting season is around September. So I made a large focus in this area, but as well as annually for the study of pastures and the impact on cattle. So here's a depiction of the max, min, and mean temperatures using the IPCC Interactive Atlas. As you can see, there's darker red where the Navajo Reserve is located in the southwest of the United States. And it gets, it's not too significant, but it is significant enough to cause further drought conditions in this region. And this is with a 2 degrees Celsius warming, which is the current, which is often seen as the potential current pathway that we might be going on currently. Here is another look at a different IPCC Interactive Atlas model. This shows a projective analysis to 2100. As you can see, as the time has moved on, we can see more intense warming, and especially in that range from June to September, which is where my focus is. There are actually significant and drastic warmings that will occur as the years go on. Here is a depiction of the change in precipitation within the Navajo reservation from 1910 to 2010. So a 100-year stretch. As you can see, there is a steady decrease in precipitation that is depicted through various data points that have been measured along the way. And this will obviously have a direct impact on the severity of drought that is experienced in the reservation. Here's another graph depicting another variable when concerning drought conditions is the average snow depth. This is obviously specifically for the mountains that exist. This is for Arizona as well. As you can see, there's also another steady decline from 1930 to 2010, and with many points that have been taken. Here's a map showing the drought severity index. As you can see, It is rather drier or more intensely dry in the western areas of the reservation. But also you can kind of see how it is rather spread out overall for moderate dryness between the different agencies of the reservation. And this study was taken between April 2019 and April 2020. Here's a breakdown of the different grazing districts. As you can see, almost every part of the reserve has a grazing district. And these ones in the western part of the regions will be impacted more severely, specifically District 19, District 20, District 16 and 14, 15. Those will all have increased and more severe drying and reduced pasture availability. Here's a depiction of corn growth temperature ranges offered by University. As you can see, corn can survive in a very large range, relatively speaking. And however, as time moves on and climate change intensifies, this range corn will have to potentially exceed its range, or at least be in the extreme end of its ranges, which will negatively impact also the quality of the corn. Here is a census that was taken of the Navajo people and their actual opinion of their living conditions, specifically related to climate change, between concerned, no response, not concerned, very concerned. My focus was on precipitation, food availability, and farming. As you can see, the precipitation is more than 50% of very concerned, and food availability is very close to 50%, as well as farming. Here's the Census of Agriculture for 2012 offered by the USDA. This is a breakdown of the success of the farms and ranches located in the different agencies. As you can see, there is rather lack of success of these farms and ranches. For the less than 1,000, there's the highest number of ranches and farms that fall under that category, whereas between 1,000 and 4,000, 1,000 to 4,999, there are much fewer, and definitely above 5,000. There is $5,000. There's even fewer. And this breaks down also the economics as well of other variables. So my results for temperature and precipitation were that temperature will increase by 2.6 degrees Celsius, which will obviously have an impact on drought. And also precipitation will decrease by 4.2%, which is something definitely to be concerned about. Because as a result, in a future increases in temperature and decreases in precipitation, there will be a lack of moisture. The SPEI score for the Southwest region of the United States is between -1 and -2, indicating an average to moderate severe drought. The SPEI score ranges from -5 to 5, the negatives being more drier conditions and the positives being wetter conditions. So this lies currently not too concerning, but as time goes on and climate change intensifies, we'll definitely see that number decreasing towards the -3, -4 region. So the impact, the formula for the SPEI is also shown here at the right. So for farming and cattle, According to a study that was done in March by the Food Distribution Research Society, drought has caused losses of up to $8.2 million and $0.4 million for the cattle and hay sectors. This is rather significant for the Navajo reservation. Significant losses. And for 2-year drought reduces causes in the cattle sector can directly be estimated to be $3.5 million on the Navajo Nation. So here's one last figure or map, I should say, depicting the drought or dry conditions of April 2014. As you can see as well, the Western region, as I said before, is experiencing the highest level of drought. But this was only in April 2014. So as the years have gone on, there has been a steady pattern of increase in dryness and drought. For my discussion, I answered 2 different questions. What's the impact that climate is having on crops and cattle? Well, it's increasing temperature and decreasing precipitation. Temperatures will continue to increase, causing crops to be stretched towards their more extreme end of ability to grow. And these temperatures will increase during growing and harvesting seasons, which will cause potentially large losses in harvest, as well as available pasture lands for cattle. This will thus have a direct negative impact on the Navajo people's economy, as seen in the last slide. So what's the effect of the Navajo way of life as a whole? The Navajo people have had to resort to dry land farming techniques due to the increase in drought prevalence, and it will also have to reduce the size of usable pasture lands as dryness spreads and intensifies. This will also have a direct impact on the number of cattle they are able to have on the reserve as well. The Navajo people will then have to be forced to either change their ways, choose different ways to run their society, really, or implement mitigation and management strategies to prepare for predicted drought events. It is the responsibility of the United States to assist in the preservation of Navajo culture by creating and following through with drought management action. This may include inputting irrigation systems, expanding the reservation's range into areas with greener pastures, managing climate, and the best way to solve this would be to manage climate change as a whole, to limit drought in the Navajo Preserve and around the world. For my conclusion, I've learned many things during this project. One being a scientific process, starting from an idea to a question to a hypothesis and testing that hypothesis with real data. Doing a geographic analysis of a specific region, using various different analytical resources to study a variable and a region, including the IPCC Interactive Atlas. I learned more about the climate and its impact on society and the environment. I haven't really studied what climate change's impact has on society, but I'm well aware of its impact on the environment, so that was very interesting. I explored the relationship between the impact climate change has on a minority as well, which is often can be overlooked. Things that I've learned from this course, the utilization of different sources of climate change research, such as the IPCC Interactive Atlas, and En-ROADS. I discovered the available resources for studying climate, and I found out how many actually were available, which I didn't realize how many were actually. I also learned the various climate change mitigation strategies, especially through the En-ROADS lab. I also grew in my ability to investigate and read peer-reviewed literature. And through the lectures, I better understood the climate processes, factors, patterns, and effects. And here is my bibliography. Thank you for listening.